What's the saddest fact you know? There is a genetic disorder that makes it impossible for some people to sleep. So far only 20 people are known to have it, and none have lived past 30. None have lived past 30. That's not true. There's a reporter in my state who has it, and she's 31 I think. And her mum had it, and died at 61. There's a couple of families who have it and all their kids have about a 50% chance of inheriting it. Typically it is triggered as adults, so it must be insane growing up knowing there's a good chance that you'll one day never sleep again. There's a recording of the last koyo bird singing before it went extinct. It was a mating call sung by a male bird. The song has breaks for the female bird to respond. There's no response because the male koyo is the last of its kind. This is the recording. Link. An American ornithologist named H. Douglas Pratt captured its reverberant waves on his microphone, creating a duplicate of the now extinct bird's song. The call was later stored at Cornell University's Department of Ornithology, where it was digitized and made available for infinite replication. Over 20 years later, in 2009, the koyo's call was remixed by a man named Robert David. He added a haunting echo, uploaded it to YouTube, and likely forgot about it entirely. There is an article in Silica magazine about how that YouTube video inspired an environmental artist named Jacob Kudsk-Steenson to interview the last ornithologists who witnessed the bird interacting in the wild. A guy in my area had just retired on a Friday. The following Wednesday he was out fishing and a thunderstorm came up. He pulled his boat out of the lake, and while standing next to his car on the boat ramp lightning took him out. 5 blessed days of retirement. Elephants will mourn other elephants in their group dying, and will hold funerals for them, and will even recognize the bones of said elephant and cry out in sadness. Read about a dolphin who had learned some basic communication, and was in some sort of pen. Dolphins can suicide by going underwater, and refusing to go back up for air. This dolphin was miserable, and told its handler goodbye, before going under and killing itself. The fact the dolphin was sentient enough to choose suicide breaks my heart. Thank you for the hug award. There is a plastic bag at the bottom of the Mariana Trench. This got me more pissed than sad. Penguins sometimes get raped by sea lions. These young seals are those who can't mate with a female, because a larger sea lion controls a massive harem. After getting raped, the penguin's head are munched off most of the time. Here is a video documentary link about it. All whales eventually lose the energy to surface for oxygen, so they essentially begin to sink and drown. The nice thing is this often ends up in a situation called a whale falling, where entire ecosystems develop at the ocean's floor, based on using the whale to live and thrive in. It's a little grim for sure, but in a circle of life way it sustains hundreds of creatures for years, which I think is a hint beautiful. For me it's the death of the 13-year-old Colombian girl Mayra Sanchez in 1985. She was trapped in water after a volcanic eruption, kneeling with her legs trapped under debris, and there was no way to extricate her without triggering a rise in the water level, which would have drowned her. Responders considered amputating her legs, but decided that she probably wouldn't survive, and that the most humane thing to do was to let her die. The would-be rescuers and some journalists stayed with her for 3 days, while she joked and prayed, and sang and left messages for her mother, before dying of either gangrene or hypothermia. Photojournalist Frank Fernier took an award-winning photo of her that haunts me link. Divers discovered that Sanchez's legs were caught under a door made of bricks, with her aunt's arms clutched tightly around her legs and feet. Her aunt's corpse was still grasping to her feet the entire time she was stuck there. I read this like 7 times trying to figure out whether or not I'm miscomprehending. That's stuck in nuts. Swans can die of broken heart when their mates die. This can happen with a number of monogamous bird species. Tawny frogmoths have been observed sitting next to their dead partner crying until they died of starvation. I once saw a gala sitting in heavy traffic next to the body of its dead mate, heedless of the cars passing overhead. Birds love hard. The Christmas after the peaceful Christmas during World War I was one of the bloodiest days of the war. pretty sure they increased mandatory trench raids in the lead up to prevent the soldiers from getting too chummy. They had real problems motivating the soldiers to fight in the weeks following the first Christmas truce. You are right. Both sides saw an opportunity as well. The thought was, well, they laid down arms last year, maybe they will this year as well. Some astronauts in the Challenger disaster link survived the initial explosion and only died once the orbiter hit the water. Can't imagine how the few felt when their shuttle exploded. Some of their colleagues dead, and they are plummeting rapidly to their deaths. Big Bird from Sesame Street was originally supposed to go on, but was too tall, so they sent a teacher instead. Source link. Imagine if Big Bird actually went. Sorry kids. Big Bird won't be on the show due to family issues. He flew too close to the Sunday. Researchers accidentally killed the oldest animal in 2006, Ming the clam. Its actual name was Hafren. It washed up on the shores of Iceland in 2006. It got the name Ming from the Sunday Times because it was born during the Ming Dynasty. Source, link. Dodo birds were really friendly because they had no natural predators and we killed them all. Fun fact, it wasn't even deliberate. We introduced rats and pigs to the island that ate all their eggs. That's happening again to the kakapo. Junko Furuta's killers are alive and well and free. One of the 4 boys, Shinji Minato, is on trial again for attempted murder. He slashed a man in the throat with a knife, but the man survived. Link. If only past behavior could have indicated some pattern of violent crimes. A majority of people, when asked, would rather die at home than at the hospital. A majority of people, when recorded, die at the hospital rather than at home. Sad fact. I work in the hospital, and from my perspective it's mostly the family members who do not know how to deal with death that keep the patients in the hospital rather than at home. I get it's super hard to allow a loved one to die, but we have to talk about it as a society more. If a sheep is not sheared, it will be weighed down and eventually fall over, and ends up starving to death. Same with alpacas. Their wool will become so tight that it will cause them physical pain and actually cause them to bleed from it becoming tangled. Wild alpacas don't experience this, since they'll shed their wool naturally. That sex trafficking children is real, actively ongoing, and adults will be professionally doing it all across the world any given point. For animal testing involving dogs, most laboratories use beagles as they are the most forgiving of the people inflicting pain on them. Many people go through the last years of their life sad and chronically lonely. As a loving father, this one really hits me. I won't be there for them in the end. Be good to each other. We're all sons, daughters, sisters, brothers, fathers, mothers. Life is made up of meetings and partings. That is the way of it. Kermit the Muppet Christmas Carol. I learned today that if a grizzly bear has a single cub, it will abandon it. Weird. What's the reason for this? The hypothesis is that a single cub will need 3 years of care, while if she abandons a single cub now, next year or the year after, that she is more likely to have twins or even triplets. This isn't some set law though. It was just observed on at least some occasions. And a reasoning guessed. Link. Why don't they just ask the mama bear on why she does that? I forget the percentage of it, but a shocking amount of people die alone with no spouse or family. This always seemed to be a pessimistic estimation to me, but it really sunk in when I worked in a hospital, which means our chances of dying alone in some nursing home or house is higher than we think. 785 million people do not have access to safe water. Access includes having water within a 30-minute round trip for collecting it and carrying it home. It's sad, but it made me immensely proud and happy too. My brother had cancer and an infection. He was disabled and had lived through 42 years of endless struggle. He beat the cancer, but the infection got worse. Then, the cancer came back. He fought and fought until one day the doctor called us to say there was nothing more he could do. Either the infection would kill him, or the cancer would. We went to be with my brother when the doctor gave him the diagnosis. By then my brother couldn't speak. After he told him, my brother put his hand under his chin and tapped it, meaning chin up. He wasn't afraid. He'd fought so long and now he knew he could stop. His football team were playing that night, so the nurse arranged for him to watch it. We wanted to stay, but he told us to leave. I went home heartbroken. That night at about 1:45 am my mum rang me to tell me he'd died. He was the bravest person I've ever known, and to this day I miss him so much. No matter what life threw at him, he worked through it and never complained. The nurse said he'd watch the game. They won and then he went to sleep. He never woke up. RIP brother. I love you. Life can be heartbreakingly unfair. A friend's sister suddenly passed away because of a heart attack last summer at age 40, leaving behind a bright, young, then orphaned son. My friend and his wife immediately took him in, gave him a home, and cared so much for him. They were very careful, loving, and considerate. They found a preschool for him, went to therapy with him, and participated in it in order to support him getting through the trauma of losing your only parent. In December my friend passed away because of a heart attack. How awful for everyone. I hope they are doing okay, especially the little boy. This reminded me of how unfair my granddad's death was. He retired in his 50s and went to spend a year living abroad with my gran. They had all these plans to spend their long retirement together. 6 months later he was dead of cancer. Oh, and my mum, who was orphaned before she became a teenager because her parents died close together, of completely separate causes. You're right. Life really is pretty unfair. That some of the remaining people in concentration camp actually died because of overeating. An octopus dies after giving birth because she stops eating while hatching their eggs. Edit: she lays eggs and does not give birth, and she protects that egg and therefore eats nothing until it has hatched. I really didn't think right while typing the sentence. I'm sorry. I just learned this yesterday watching my octopus teacher. Very fascinating doc. I totally agree. I was so fascinated by this whole documentary. Whenever I change an old spiral fluorescent or incandescent light bulb in seldom used fixture, I think to myself, this bulb will probably outlive me. I'm not dying of anything that I know of, but I'm at that age where I know most of my years are probably behind me. On December 5th 1942 in Auschwitz-Birkenau, after the round call of the morning, which was atrocious, since you would need to stand still for hours until the count matches, the SS took the entirety of the women camp, moved them in front of a ditch within the camp, and asked the 6,000 present alive women to get naked. Then, the SS armed with whips, pistols and canes got over the ditch, made 2 parallel lines to create some sort of corridor. Then they screamed the women prisoners to jump over the ditch and run through the corridor of SS soldiers. During the run, the SS with the whips and canes truck-whipped pulled away all the women they deemed unfit for labor due to sickness and physical exhaustion. Out of the 6,000 women that day, around 1,500 made it to the end of the corridor without being pulled away. They were the lucky ones, and the camp commandant made a speech sort of like you were chosen to live. The 4,500 women pulled away by the SS, or who couldn't jump far enough to pass the ditch, were pushed into trucks and sent to the gas chamber. They apparently screamed like banshees, full knowing they were sent to their death. Very few women survived from 1942 to 1945 in Auschwitz, but the detail of this day is present in the few books' testimonies from survivors because of how horrible it was. Most rape is by a family member or family friend. If not brought to light, it is likely to keep occurring. It hit me like a brick. Was thinking about my dad who died at 73. Thinking about my age 44, I realized my life was likely more than halfway over. If your spouse commits suicide by self-inflicted gunshot wound, renter's insurance covers the repairs under the term of explosion. That every 20 seconds, a child dies from a lack of access to clean water. Diarrhea is the one leading cause of death in children. Chris Farley's last words were "Don't leave me," said to a prostitute who then stole his watch. Bill Finger, the man who created a vast majority of, if not everything, that makes Batman a success today, not only never got credit in his lifetime, but was also called a liar by Bob Kane. Kane, who came up with an idea of a bat-themed vigilante called the Batman, later used his father's law firm to make up a contract in which he not only got sole credit, but also any major proceeds stemming from the success of Batman. Bill died penniless and on his couch in a shitty apartment in 1974, while Kane was running around telling everyone he created Batman and such. One of my neighbors has a 9-year-old daughter who has a very rare genetic condition. She's not expected to live much beyond her mid-late teens. The girl doesn't know and believes she's a perfectly normal child. It's heartbreaking to hear her saying that she wants to be a hairdresser when she grows up. She ain't never gonna grow up. I'm madly in love with my wife of 35 years. We are each other's best friends and we are together 24/7. We do massages on each other every morning and snuggle spoon together all night. We haven't spent a night apart in 3 decades. We are older now and I know one of us is going to die alone. My classmate's mom was always sad about how her husband was never around for her daughter's birthday since he was in the merchant navy and was on duty at the time year of his daughter's birthday. However, for her 18th birthday, after moving mountains, he managed to get a few days off to drop in. The parents planned this as a surprise for the girl. They dressed up in party costumes and opened her room door at 12 AM and yelled surprise, only to find their daughter hanging from the fan. One day, sometime far in the future, someone is going to speak your name for the very last time, and then you'll be completely forgotten about. Stephen Hawking died a little over a year before the first photograph of a black hole. He knew how they looked anyway. It was black and hole shaped, yeah. There has been a day when you and your childhood friend got out to play for the last time and none of you two was aware of it. How there's probably some dude scamming an old lady right now. That I won't get to feel my husband's presence anymore. He passed away suddenly on the 11th. I miss him every minute of the day. Why did I click on this? The Grinch lived where everyone dumped their trash. So how do you think he obtained his dog Maximum? Someone threw the dog away in a dump on the tip of a frozen cliffside. Surely to die. Duck the hoss.